Hello, welcome to the Old Man Orange Podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Ryan Dunnigan.
We're getting to the end of the run of the good old Bruce Lee marathon and finishing it all off with Bruce Lee's Game of Death, the one that, you know, is about all of 1/3 finished, and then a handful of years later, someone's like, shit, we need to make some more Bruce Lee money. Let's Frankenstein this bitch and see what happens. People are craving Bruce Lee. We have the power. We have some reels we've had sitting in our basement that Bruce went out and shot before, you know, he did Enter the Dragon, so we'll figure out a way.
Well, I guess that's the weird thing, because he had a concept for it, not the whole thing mapped out, but just a general concept, and he had access to a couple of sets. So, like, let's film, like, all right, so there's more to it, but at some point, the main theme is the guy and some of his friends got to go up this level, 5 different levels. They shot 3 of them, and then, you know, they're just like, well, we'll work a story around it later, but we have a concept. Because he was basically trying to find a way to just sell people on Jeet Kune Do in his own martial arts style. Because each style, I guess, the footage that wasn't seen until probably, because there's the footage that made it to the movie, and then there's the rest of 34 minutes of footage that got released on the Criterion, and we're seeing that on a documentary at some point too, where it was like, okay, this is supposed to meant to sell his Jeet Kune Do style, and on top of that, show these guys with these rigid styles fighting someone, losing, possibly dying, and then he witnesses and adapts, and then the last person he fights is Akeem Abdul-Jabbar, who he has basically the same style as Bruce.
Yeah, and it's just almost like, here's like, in a sense, the giant version of Bruce, and he's got to fight him. I also love how Bruce, like when you watch the real footage and they kind of show it, he's got the 2 friends that he literally just sort of, it's that classic thing, hey, when you bring your friends along, and then there looks like something kind of dangerous, and you're like, hey,
James Tien.
Yeah, James Tien, can you go try that first? I'm just not too sure if jumping off this rock into this, the water's going to be safe, so I want to make, you look kind of ballsy, you go ahead. And in every single one of these fights, he sends these 2 guys in first, and then they get their asses fucking whooped, and they're like, oh, Bruce, oh, jeez. Like, okay, good, I figured it out now. I know
sometimes
what his style is.
James Tien's meant to be the cocky guy, and every so often he would kind of bum rush his way in there before Bruce does, you don't want it. Okay, all right, I tried to tell you.
Well, I feel it's one of those ones that was a psychological thing. Bruce acts oh, I'm gonna go first, and then James Tien's oh, dude, I'm gonna do it. You're oh, okay. It's that thing he's almost going towards the edge of a bridge, oh, I'm gonna fucking jump, dude, I'm gonna do it, and then James Tien just comes running over the back, jumping, thinking he's gonna one-up Bruce, but that was really the plan the whole time.
Oh shit, that water is shallow. Good thing, James. Thanks for taking the leap on that one. The other dude, I feel bad. What's the other dude's name? I feel bad. It's James. And I'm sure I'm guessing he's probably popped in a Bruce Lee movie or 2, because it's kind of like I said, it's kind of like an Adam Sandler thing. He brings all his friends with him on all these movies.
It really is. You don't really think about it, but that's totally the Bruce Lee movies were the original. I mean, I guess there's probably somebody out there who always brought their friends along too, but these ones really felt it's all the same guys almost in all 5 movies for the most part. There's just you recognize them left and right. You're oh, hey, what do you know?
That or a Simon Pegg, Edgar Wright movie. Mm-hmm. Now it's basically always the same cast, just mixed around and all that. Yeah. So I guess maybe we could talk about the original footage first, and then talk about the main movie, because the original footage is very simple, where it's just they're going up from layer to layer fighting these different styles. And I actually I know that he was still kind of working a story around it, and it is kind of Bruce Lee just looking cool and everybody else tripping and falling, but I think I like this character Bruce Lee was working up to, because this is kind of a good balance between it's more of his Enter the Dragon character, where he's kind of cocky and kind of serious, but at the same time, he's a little different in the sense, because he likes to have a little bit more fun. He's almost playing with his, with the guy he's fighting. He's I can fuck this guy up now that I know his style, and I'm going to fuck with him a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But he could still be sort of reserved, too, without being too, out of control or something like that. Well, because that's the thing, that's really the thing about, the Game of Death, is, that 34 minutes or whatever of footage is almost some of the best Bruce Lee footage ever put together. That's the thing about this movie, is it has, that section of it is so good just in that like little like you could just imagine that this movie, if it was probably finished the way Bruce Lee would want, it probably would be the one that you'd be like, oh dude, it's like the Pulp Fiction of Bruce Lee movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is probably, if it got done the way he wanted it to, because, you could tell there's more money put in this, because like we said before, Way of the Dragon felt like an independent movie. This was a movie that was going to be originally after Way of the Dragon, and the concept was, he didn't have the whole story lined out, but basically he was a retired martial artist champion. Some Korean syndicate of some sort kidnapped his family and forced him to go into this tower where there's some kind of item above, some kind of mystical item, but it's in these grounds where no weapons are allowed, but only skilled martial artists can go up there. And I think that they didn't really work around the stories of the two guys that were with them. There's apparently two other characters that were with them before, I think, but by that point in the story, they were killed off. But these other two guys are going with them. Everyone was there for their own reasons. So I think it would have been interesting to see, and even though James Dean gets smacked around a lot, in this he looks like he's trying to be kind of like more of the Vegeta character, where the other guy, Krillin, and Bruce Lee, well, he's just Bruce Lee. No, he's no Goku. He's just Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
And from there, it's kind of there's one thing, because as he's going up to each of these levels, initially I thought it was a little awkward, the whole thing, like when he's fighting Abdul Jabbar and they're fighting the same way. But then for some reason, I'm sure they would have fitted it into the story somehow whenever they were done, but out of context, when he actually punches through, because he's in a dark room, he's wearing sunglasses, he punches through some light, and he just kind of cowers, like, oh, it's hard to see, and just kind of cowers back, like, really? Okay, is he a vampire or some shit? And then
as the fight Blade up there or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Well, because Blade's a daywalker, so that wouldn't make any sense, but yeah.
I get what you meant, though, yeah. No, but there's... As that fight goes on, there's actually a part that's an unintentional jump scare, because it cuts to Abdul Jabbar's eyes, which are like 1972 photoshopped, and they have these red slits. They have these red slits. So who knows? Maybe they're trying to fit in something of Chinese lore or something, but for some reason he had fucked up eyes and he could only fight in the dark. So
yeah, and that's not in the piece together 1978 version. That's only when they found the other footage, and you see that you're like, oh, what the fuck? So it almost gave it this extra weird fantasy edge to it. I'm but just that light hint where it's just there ever so slightly, but then you're kind of like, oh, well, that's fucking weird. Because, it is that thing where, I remember because when I first watched, the 78 version, I thought, oh, is he supposed to be blind? Is that what it kind of is? Because it goes by so much faster in that one. And then, you watch this one, it's like, oh, no, I see what's going on here more. And so it's it's more in a sense, Bruce Lee's fighting somebody with, light sensitivity disability.
Yeah.
He's
just he's like, give me that handicap parking spot. Here's some sunlight.
Yeah, just like one of those ones, when he's pulling his foot out, he's really just pulling out the handicap sign. It's they're like, who gave this guy a license? He's got light sensitivity. Should he really be out driving?
Here's a better question: how the fuck does he fit in the car?
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean?
Are his knees already at the at the roof of the just imagine getting out of a VW Bug or something
Yeah, it's just got the sunroof open. Looks like he's driving around in a Mario Kart.
His head's sticking out of the sunroof. Just
yeah, one of those things.
Well, if they ever do a Bruce Lee racer thing, Bruce Lee kart, that's got to be Abdul's kart right there.
Yeah, exactly, one of those ones. And it's one of those ones. So what do you think about those towers like that? Okay, you know how easily Bruce Lee just started punching holes into that paper thing? It's now, if you're over there, if you get a hard gust of wind, do you have to go out and fucking put up some new paper on the side of the wall in a 5-story building just all the time? That's what I thought about.
What if the person on the bottom on the bottom floor, he's the maintenance guy also, so they just hear a big gust of wind, and they just hear very distantly Abdul Jabbar ah, fuck, the light. I know. Give me my shit. And he just goes and gets a bunch of rolls of paper and some old fashioned like paste from the 1700s. The only thing they still use on it.
Yeah, exactly. One of those ones.
Fucking bullshit. Sputtering himself going up and down those flight stairs. It's like, I don't see why I'm the one that has to do this. Maybe the guy with the tiger motif and the nunchucks. Why can't we teach him how to do this shit? As maybe rotating shifts with us or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Or the white gi with the gold trim. Why the fuck can't he do none of this? Don't give me that because he got his back baned or whatever.
Yeah, he literally gets his back broken just like that, just like Batman getting his back broken. But I like how Bruce, when he was putting these scenes together too, he didn't tell anybody who was on what floor. So everybody kind of could be I could be floor 1, I could be floor 2. They even had it where Bob Wall was even saying in one of the special features on there, he said that Bruce had 7 floors. That was that was the idea going, because he's this is the sad thing. He's like I want to say I wish someone could go out there and find a script. He's like, I don't think a script existed. I think Bruce had it all in his head, and that's how he just kind of had it. And he was even saying that on Way of the Dragon, he's like, there wasn't really a script either. Bruce just kind of he was the script. Because I was thinking the whole time I was watching, I was kind of you know what, this sounds kind of weird, but this is almost if there was a script, it would be almost kind of cool for someone, kind of like what they sort of do with comic books, the movies that have never been made. They kind of put a comic book together, but almost to do just get the best guys of making kung fu movies today and just actually make a Game of Death one, just exactly kind of how Bruce won and so on. But it's I guess if that script doesn't exist, well, that's kind of tough. I know that so many things have taken the Game of Death style and continued on, but just a straight up hey, here's the we have so many movies where there's the Bruce Lee character anyways, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You get a lot of these movies made where it's just oh, it's Bruce Lee. It's you get a new Bruce Lee movie, but it's just somebody playing Bruce Lee, but not in an exploitation kind of way.
Yeah, and well, it's kind of interesting because I'll be honest, when I first heard about this movie, I assumed it came out in 1973 or 1974, and I assumed that they just slapped this thing. The one version we got, not the 34 minutes of raw footage. Mm-hmm. The one we got, I assumed it was just basically something they slapped together in a year and change maybe, and try to edit around. Now, knowing that this came out in '79, they had time to sit on it. Because what happened was after Bruce Lee died, everyone they wanted more Bruce Lee. So that's where all the Bruceploitation movies, we just talked about a few episodes ago, were just mentioned, all started popping up. And I think you know what, we actually have the raw footage that people want to know about, want to see. We can maybe craft something around this. And that's where they got, what's his name? The director of Enter the Dragon. They got Robert Klaus in there. And come up with his own makeshift story.
Did you watch that interview that had, what's his name on there? I just mentioned his name. Bob Wall. Robert Wall.
I didn't get a chance to see that. No, I didn't watch that one.
It's funny because it's 30 minutes long. It's actually got a lot of good stuff on it. But Robert, every moment he gets, he's like, "Fuck Bob Klaus. That guy was a fucking asshole, fucking idiot. Didn't know what he was fucking doing. Me and Bruce fucking hated that guy so much. God, if there was anybody I fucking hate more in this world than fucking Bob Klaus." Okay, what was the question again? I mean, I can't kid you not. It felt like every single moment he got a chance, he's just oh, fuck that guy. Because he even says he's just to get away from being in another movie with him, when they said hey, you want to do this Game of Death thing again? He was you gotta pay me 3 times more than normal, thinking that they wouldn't take him. And he's oh, they did pay me that. Oh shit, I guess I'll show up. But here's the thing: if we film this fight scene, I don't fucking want him I don't want him in the same fucking country as me.
Well, I'll say this: this has a little bit more of an Enter the Dragon vibe, not exactly in a bad way, but there was I'll say it. This movie, I mean, when I first saw it, I'll be honest, I've only seen this movie 3 times. Mm-hmm. When I first saw it, I was initially a little disappointed, just because I thought it was a full-on they'll edit around some stuff, but I assumed it was a mostly finished movie. And then you get to the end, you're all the real Bruce footage, the real Bruce footage is not recycled from other movies, is right here at the end of the movie. So, okay, all right, that's all cool. But then, how campy it is. They're coming up with all these body doubles, obviously a body double. finding weird different disguises for him, where he's like matches Malone from Batman for a second, you know. Which I'll say the concept of that is cool. Bruce Lee with sideburns and sunglasses, like he's like, you know, at like a biker or something. I think that's a cool look, and I would have liked to see Bruce Lee go that way, like maybe in like, you know, his like Unforgiven style movie, like in the 90s, rock that for a minute. But if he made it that long, but all that being said, though, I think like this movie, it has like some good concepts and a good way of going about it. It did everything it could, but there's some things where it's just like, dude, that is so obviously like a cutout of Bruce Lee's face on the mirror when you you know, or it's so obviously like a body double. And there's certain cuts they make. They'll show Bruce Lee from other movies to cut to and reacting.
And some of them like don't even fit at all. It'll be like a room that has a background of like white, and then it cuts to like Bruce Lee, and he's like in like a neon room, and it's like back to like being a room that has like a white background again. It's just like
really incompetent shit. You know what I mean? Like before getting ready for this podcast, I did not know that Robert Klaus did this. I would have assumed it was more prepared or a little more like, cause there's some shit that just looks very, I mean, not trying to be a dick, but very fucking amateurish, because there's a part where Bruce Lee's, when he goes to fight Robert Wall in the locker room, not the real Bruce Lee, but his character, there's a part where somebody enters a room and then it shows it's Bruce Lee's body double, then it cuts to real Bruce Lee from, I think, Chinese Connection or Fist of Fury, turning, and he's suddenly in an alley with a window above him, you know? Then it cut back, we're in a locker room.
You know, because when I was watching it, I mean, like, and I know that's that kind of thing that, like, it's that weird thing at that time period, you know, I feel like there was just so much confusion on what to do with this, you know what I mean? Like, I think everybody in hindsight could have gone, like, oh, we could have done that way differently, but at the moment, they're like, oh, maybe we should do this. I almost think what they should have just done is kept all the Bruce Lee normal footage, and then literally just have an actor and don't try to hide that actor. Just be like, yo, this actor's just playing Bruce Lee and he's filling it in, and like don't try to have these weird cutaways. Like in a sense, I think they should almost have not had any of that Bruce Lee from the older film stuff cut in there. I think all that stuff just needs to be taken out completely and just show, the kind of the main guy, whoever is playing Bruce Lee, and I mean, just let him do just all even the close shots and so on. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think nowadays it just seems like, well, duh, that's kind of would work. I mean, I guess nowadays they would have done it like CG, like Avengers style. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They would have had it like where like young Robert Downey Jr. comes walking in.
Or young Carrie Fisher or something, yeah. No, but there's...
Shit, by that standard, they could almost do that with fucking Game of Death and just finish the fucking movie. Get Robert Rodriguez together and just, like, let's knock this...
You don't even got to do that. You can get the guy from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah, just get that guy, and then, fuck, you don't even have to even fucking do any of the CG stuff. That guy already looks good enough as is.
Yeah. Not only was he Bruce Lee, he was Ryu. Yeah,
he was Ryu as well, too, so just go for that. Yeah. But I think that's just the weirdest stuff about the Game of Death, like, it's just, like, all the stuff that they feel like they're trying to, like, trick the audience is sort of how I feel. Like, that's how it comes across. It feels like they're trying to pull a magic trick on you, but they're kind of a shitty magician, you know what I mean? And it's just not working. Where I feel like if you almost would have just even done, like, because, older movies sometimes would do this anyways, is just have an explanation at the beginning. Be like, hey, what we're doing is we're piecing together, the movie, some of it's Bruce Lee, and we're filling in the rest of, and you can make it up a little bit from there and make it sound nicer. But, like, that's what they almost should have done, and just have it go through there. Because I think it's got, like, the most weirdest thing ever, because they're like, how can we fit some of these Bruce Lee movies together? Well, maybe, Billy, his character, will actually be, he's a martial artist just like Bruce Lee. And he's got a blonde wife. And he's got, they start going through this. And then this movie almost brings up all, like, those, like, Bruce Lee kind of, like, mythos of, like, oh, Bruce Lee got shot on stage and, then he was taken away and, he's dead. But he's not really dead. Instead, he's actually still alive.
Well, here's the weird thing.
With Elvis Presley and JFK.
Yeah. Well, here's the weird thing about the whole part where he gets shot, because there's a part where they're filming the shooting scene from Fist of Fury, or Chinese Connection as we know it over here, and the way how his son died in real life, Brandon, was hit, like it was a misfire on a blank on a gun that was blank during The Crow. They were filming The Crow, and he was up and coming. Everyone's like, "Oh, it's Bruce Lee's son. He's coming. He's going to be a big deal." They're filming The Crow, and then he dies on the set because somebody misloaded a blank. And that's not exactly what happens in the movie. Somebody actually has a real gun on the set, but the same. It's kind of eerie. That same concept kind of happened right there in this movie, which wasn't the original plot, but retroactively added after the fact.
Well, yeah, because it's just like that's such like a rare idea, anyways. So the fact that actually happened and carried on, that's the part. It is kind of bizarre, and so on. But I know that that's also where like people just got sort of confused because if you went out and kind of just like asked people on the street like how Bruce Lee died, you would still get like a lot of like different answers. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those ones like still a lot of people kind of don't realize that no he just took a painkiller for a headache and his brain grew and couldn't handle it and that was it. It's like but like some people be like, oh, he was shot on stage, or he was taken out in like a back alley fight, or he's still alive, or what have you. People got all kinds of weird explanations.
Joey Diaz, who he has his own podcast at this point, but he's on Joe Rogan all the time, has the theory that he was taken out by like the triads for like because apparently they ran a lot of entertainment in China or something. He was turning down scripts, so people were making parallels to this movie to Chinese triad shit. So I don't believe. I think it is an aneurysm, but it's one of those things that's just
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of those ones. But I think it's also those ones like those real life kind of just that just kind of happened deaths. I think it's kind of hard for some people to believe when it's somebody like as legendary as like Bruce Lee. Though I will say that triad stuff's not like out of the question as far as for other things. Because I know Jackie Chan had that problem when he was getting started. The triads would try to push him into doing Shaw Brothers movies and certain ones he didn't want to be a part of.
I can see that. A lot of times you have people on sets, movies, and you have guys on sets trying to prove themselves, make a name, thinking, I'm an extra, but I can kick the shit out of the star. So you have that happening. We talked about that, I think, on Enter the Dragon, maybe some other movies. And then you also... So I can see that not being totally out of possibility, but in all honesty, I think it probably was more likely an aneurysm. Mm-hmm. But maybe there was some foul play. We don't know. We weren't there. So, mm-hmm. But, yeah. But I'll say that the story itself, the one that Robert Cloud and they came up with for Game of Death for the movie they released in 1979. I like, or 1978. I do like that this movie had and don't take this as me saying it like an SJW kind of way, but the diversity, and by that I mean by the characters. Like, okay, we got Abdul Hakim Jabbar, who's just kind of like this badass hitman. We do have the guy who has the with the sticks. Everyone has their own defined fighting style. This guy over here is kind of like, an old guy. This guy, he's a sharpshooter from a distance kind of thing. So I liked how there's diverse, like each one of them seemed like a very different character. Robert Wall was more like the strongman guy, which I'm going to say this. By this point, I'm not going to say I feel like I know Robert Wall that well, but one of what he reminds me of.
Who's he remind you of?
An evil Ned Flanders. Because Ned Flanders, whenever he takes off his shirt,
he's always jacked.
Just like ridiculously, he's jacked, but he has that diddly diddly. And Robert Wall, his voice does not match the way he's. He looks like, all right, class, now open up to chapter 27. Today we're talking about photosynthesis.
Yeah, exactly. He always does. I don't know what it is. Like, I almost feel like his voice is like dubbed in there or something like that weird, because it's like, it never feels like
it's
it
like
matches.
That every movie.
Yeah,
every movie is.
I like how Robert also had a story that like I think it was Bob Klaus, whatever, was gonna he was spreading a rumor that like, oh, Bruce Lee's gonna fucking, like, because you accidentally stabbed Bruce Lee with the bottle, Bruce Lee's gonna fucking kill you tomorrow. And then he's like, that sounds like fucking bullshit. So he's like, I called up, so he's like, so I went over to Bruce Lee's place. I was like, Bruce, you're gonna fucking kill me tomorrow? And Bruce is like, no, man, I'm not gonna kill you. He's like, well, somebody's fucking spreading a rumor. So Bruce starts calling people, and he starts speaking in Chinese and whatnot, and everybody keeps saying that rumor keeps coming from the fucking director. So he's like, so me and Bruce, we fucking drive on over there, go over to the director's house and go, yo, Robert, what the fuck you doing? And he's like, you spread fucking rumors and stuff. And he's like, and then I fucking judo chop him in the fucking forehead, and he falls on the ground. It's the 70s, you can get away with that kind of stuff. And then Bruce is just there too, just to be like, never fucking again, you son of a bitch.
They get back in their car and like they just drive off blaring like Deep Purple's "Let's go space trucking, come on!"
Do.
Just listen to that, all like just getting amped, like we're gonna beat the fuck out of Bob Klaus when we get there. Come on, no.
Well, you just gotta think about it. Like, okay, you're a guy, you directed your whole life, you've been around artsy people, and all of a sudden these two fucking, martial arts masters of around the world just show up at your fucking house. What are you gonna do? It's like world-class karate guy, world-class kung fu guy. What are you gonna do? It's just like the most threatening. It's like the most threatening thing that could possibly happen.
Still different ethnicities and styles, but it sounds kind of like a Ryu and Ken dynamic.
It really does, almost at the end of the day.
I think that in itself is like a movie. Like, Bob Klaus is hiding in his like mansion, and like Bruce Lee and Rob Wall are trying to get in.
That's like a bottle film horror.
It is. It could work. Like,
those kind of things too. I just like how
there's a moment where he thinks he gets away. He barricades backing up. He backs up to like another wall, and then just a fist comes through that one.
Well, that's one of those things that, probably somewhere if you looked high and low in like Chinese cinema, you might be able to find some type of like a horror martial arts movie that's kind of like that. But I just like the idea of the killer is actually just a martial arts guy who's just stalking you like Jason or Freddy or something like that.
I guess I've seen, when it comes to Japanese horror, well, not Japanese, when it comes to martial arts horror movies, I can name off some Japanese ones. I can name off. I don't really know them that well, but even though it's more of a weird horror, it's more of like a weird action movie with some more elements. But versus there's some other ones.
Yeah, well, those ones
that are kind of skinned by me.
There's a lot of movies that they are horror movies and they have martial arts in them. But I'm talking about something where there's almost just like the martial arts kung fu master is the guy who's like the Jason of it.
Gotcha. Well, that's okay. So rather than being kind of like some spirit
they're not
or whatever,
fighting demons or zombies or anything like that. Like one of those ones where it's just think of like a possessed Bruce Lee rising from his grave and coming to like kill the people of fucking Camp Crystal Lake for some reason.
Not a martial arts movie, even though
Jason need to take a year off. Just saying.
There's one where there's The Guest, which is like a secret agent version of that, but that movie was pretty badass. That's a little bit of martial arts in some of the fights and stuff.
Yeah, well, I guess that's more just I guess that's close. That's more like just like weird stalker type person.
Action.
Yeah.
That was more because I'm just thinking because he was like a Black Ops agent guy and he's like, on a murderous rampage and he's a nice guy. Then one day he just slips, when someone finds out or asks too many questions and he has that total I know it's more of an action horror movie than it is like a martial arts horror movie, but yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like there's stuff that gets kind of close, but still not that same position. You know what I mean? But I can't remember how we got that. Oh yeah,
I guess there's a lot of creepy shit you can do. Like he's doing slow torture scenes, just breaking bones in ways you wouldn't expect, falling them over. Very interesting ways like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's just using all his martial arts abilities and so on, just to be like an unstoppable Terminator type thing. I don't know. It just sounds kind of cool. As I said, maybe if you look hard enough, you could probably find something like this. But I don't know. I've just never ran across that before. But
yeah, I will say though, as this movie goes on, they do a good job of making you hate like the sidekick. There's the villains, the guys that work for. I think Dr. Land, who was played by I think Dean Jagger. Yeah, or was that who it was? Was Dr. Land the bad guy? Is that the name? I think that was him.
You like the guy who's the kind of
He looks like David Letterman's sidekick, the guy who was always on the piano.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, him.
So, yeah, so that guy, even though he was very hateable, which he's meant to be, Jim Marshall or Gig Young, who's playing Jim Marshall, that guy. Actually, no, I'm getting mixed up. Jim Marshall was actually the writer. There was a friend of Bruce Lee's. There was I think Hugh O'Brien. I think that was the guy who was a little bit more of like, he was the nicely dressed guy. He had the cane with a knife in it. I thought he worked as a good villain.
Yeah. No. It's like, well, that's the thing is they actually have some kind of good actors in there, and they got some kind of cool parts and so on. It really, like, I like to say this, like, the movie set up, like, not, I mean, it's the thing is like, I think you're going in with that high expectations of it being Bruce Lee, and then it's kind of like sort of a B movie at the end of the day. But, like, at the same time, there is some kind of cool characters in it. Some of the villains are kind of neat. And they even do have some good martial arts scenes, throughout the movie, that are placed in there. There's even one that was, like, there's a cut one that was in, like, the deleted scenes I saw in there. But apparently it appears in the Chinese version of Game of Death, but not in the U.S. version. Where there was this, it was probably, like, the best martial arts scene beyond the Bruce Lee stuff that I saw in there, where they're, like, fighting in, like kind of like a greenhouse type thing. And it was totally a badass fight. I don't know why they cut that out of the US one.
I didn't see that deleted scene. I'm not going to lie. I was kind of going through the different I didn't get a chance to watch them all, but I saw like the archive footage, the Criterion documentary, and then some of the blooper stuff, just because it's interesting seeing Bruce Lee fuck up, Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's like, plus it's like, you only have so much of that footage anyway, so like anything you can get, it's like, oh my gosh, there's more Bruce Lee.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm going to say, even the like body doubles and all that, those guys were still doing a good job in the fight scenes. But when it would suddenly cut to somebody fighting, and like, I don't think this is archive footage, maybe it is, and then they suddenly cut to the real Bruce Lee looking over his shoulder from like Big Boss or something, and then cut back to this. I'm like, nope, definitely not the real Bruce Lee. You just reminded me.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like, and that stuff's the thing is like, it takes me out of it. Like, two, the other thing too is because this, like, the only kind of downfall too is like this movie. It's funny because like the quality when it gets to like the real Bruce Lee Game of Death stuff, it's almost like it has that feeling of like, the Game of Death that they shot in '78 is like a made-for-TV movie, and then when you get to the real Game of Death, it's like, oh shit, they just cut into a real theatrical movie. Like, it has like there's just this different look to it as well, too.
I do think it's interesting that they use the James Tien footage, because at some point, footage, James Tien is like, fuck you guys, and like runs past while Bruce Lee's fighting the guy at the second to last
the Korean
level,
guy or whatever.
He just runs up the stairs, and then that's where he faces off Abdul Hakim Jabbar and gets fucking stomped and gets scared and tries to run off at some point from that and dies. It's kind of funny. They say, you ever hear what happened to that other Chinese actor? And it just cuts to James Tien. Like,
just like laying in the fucking corner down there. Just something happened to them.
Which, to be fair, I'm going to say I wasn't looking for it by then, but I wonder if you do watch the final, like the theatrical version, when Bruce Lee gets up there and is fighting Abdul and all that. Do you see the other guys knocked out in the background at any point? Just like, I'm wondering if you could actually spot that at any point.
Because, with the sort of shoddy editing anyways, I know that I almost want to say you do see one of the guys laying there on the ground. Because that's the one thing they do, is like, when you see all that footage, I mean, I kind of get the reason they cut that out was that so that you could just get the Bruce Lee and fit it into your story. But the sucky thing about doing that, though, is it's one of those ones, they should have kept all 34 minutes of that Bruce Lee footage like it was gold. And apparently I think there's even more stuff out there, because Robert Wall was even saying that there's actually footage of Bruce Lee and him fighting in the locker room, like the original version of it, though. Somewhere.
Oh,
yeah, he was saying this stuff existed. So it sounds like there's almost even a little bit more stuff.
I watched the wrong documentary.
Yeah, the Robert Wall one was the best one, just because every about 5 minutes, I just love how he has to be like, oh, that fucking director. If there's a fucking crook out there, somebody you should hate, he's the one. I hope he fucking dies.
Did he literally say, I hope he dies?
Pretty close to it. This guy, I mean, it's one of those ones where, like, if that special feature is actually on like the Warner Brothers version of like any of these movies, I will be surprised. Or like, because Warner Brothers, I think the Enter of the Dragon 2-disc version has a bunch of footage from Game of Death. If that interview is that, because I think it's a little bit older, so if it came from there, I would be really surprised if Warner Brothers let that one fucking go. Criterion, I was like, oh yeah, they'd be fine for it. But that's like, that always sounds like that thing, like, oh man, I'm gonna get the special features and watch the actors fucking bitch about each other.
I feel like Criterion can get footage of someone saying, you know who I also hate? Fucking Criterion. And Criterion's like, you know what? Don't keep talking. Let him say it.
Yeah,
If there's one thing you should not buy, it's Criterion DVD and Blu-rays. Like, well, we're already recording it. Keep going.
Yeah, well, these ones. But yeah, there was just some cool, interesting stuff in there. And just almost like the thing of like, because, since this guy was almost like one of Bruce Lee's best friends and whatnot, just the fact that he had, like, I feel like this guy's like, well, he's probably not making too much of the stuff up. If they did it, I'm pretty sure they did, shoot these different scenes and so on. But going back to, like, the Game of Death 1978 version, I'm just so surprised they didn't just say, like, okay, we have 34 fucking great minutes of movie. Now let's film an hour's worth of content to make it, in a sense, make sense. And just match it to that. Like, they should have had the two best friends. They should have, I don't know, I know that's, like, kind of like armchair directing a movie that's, 40 plus years ago, 50 years ago by now almost. But it is that sort of thing where it's just, it's just like...
It seems like they really overcomplicated what was a very simple movie originally. It was a very simple, straightforward movie, and not the one really a bad movie, but it was, overly complicated, I think. Not that it was a hard-to-follow movie, but just for what they had to do and what they were trying to get across. It was an overly complicated movie, and it just kind of like showed a lot of the flaws in the editing.
Yeah, well, it's just the thing, too, is because kind of the bummer, too, is in that Game of Death movie, it's like an hour and 42 minutes. Well, they only use like 11 or 12 minutes of actual Bruce Lee, like from Game of Death type footage. And it just feels like you had like another 20 minutes. Why would you think of cutting any of that? You know what I mean? Like that's, and like when you watch like the Redux version where they put all that stuff back together, you're like, all this stuff is golden material. It's all, like maybe that's in like hindsight, maybe like when you're watching it at the time, they might have some other ideas. But it is one of those ones you watch it, like, dude, it's all like awesome stuff. And like, they pretty much, they cut like all the Bruce Lee talking out for the most part. And he's like giving all his little kind of like factoids on like Jeet Kune Do and everything like that. So it seems like, I don't know, it's just one of those ones like, I don't know why they just wouldn't have just worked around it a little bit more and just kind of focused on that. And as I said, I think it's just one of those time periods where, like, people are all kind of confused on what exactly to do. So it goes back, forth, and, it's like, oh, well, maybe we'll do this, maybe we'll do that, and so on. And granted, this is one of those weird ones that this movie's the second highest grossing Bruce Lee movie.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I'll say this, it feels kind of, when you think about it, like, the idea of being a joint venture between an American company, or at least an American director, and a Chinese company, and like creative differences, both culturally and how are we going to shoot this thing, how are we going to make it, what do you think Bruce wanted, what do you guys want, what do I want? I think this movie totally reflects that. I think it totally reflects miscommunication.
I think so, too. And it's even got things in it that seem, like, so bizarre, too. When you really think about it, the fact that they actually, in this movie, use actual Bruce Lee dead corpse footage from his funeral, like, when you think about that, it's one of those ones where you're like, could you imagine any other movie doing that, being like, just using, somebody just died, and they're like, oh, well, we got this footage from his funeral, how can we work that into his final movie?
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder I imagine Wenda Lee and her daughter aren't too big of fans of this movie, I would imagine at least, but, it was probably more of one of those things that was meant to be, like, encapsulating everything about Bruce Lee and trying to probably prey on people's sympathies for Bruce Lee at the time, I imagine. Because, they also probably got in the mindset of, like, you know what, there's all these Bruce Lee rip-offs, Bruceploitation films coming out. They're making money. Why the fuck aren't we making that money when we actually have footage? And that maybe by that point, they got a little bit more desensitized to it.
I think, and then I also do think that they didn't mean it to be kind of like in poor taste. I think it was supposed to be more like honoring it, sort of like almost like the legend lives on kind of feeling, like it's that sort of stuff. But it's sort of here, it's almost like one of those ones that they had, like, they're like, oh, okay, Chadwick Boseman just passed away. Well, how are we gonna we're gonna find a way to make a Black Panther movie out of, like, what little footage we have of him left, Well, here's some of his Instagram feed. I guess we'll use that, and we'll just start cutting it. You know what I mean? Like, if you did that nowadays, it would feel like, oh my god, that seems kind of poor taste. But, just like the guy just died, and you're just trying to cut together stuff. But I think at the time it was a mixed match of like we're trying to honor him, we're trying to like make it here. We know we have this footage. People they're clamoring to see the footage. People are almost in a sense. I think they also had that feeling that like, well, people are making all these other like fake Bruce Lee movies. Why don't we give them at least a part of a real one?
Yeah, and I'll say, even in concept, the concept of the martial arts movie, where he's a martial arts film star, and some, corrupt ass like syndicates try to come in and bully him into making and he ends up fighting back. That's still in concept and in theory, an enjoyable concept for. I can't talk right now. It's still a cool concept for an action movie. I just think, though, maybe it's just more than anything, it's not so much the concept or even the characters. It's just all the weird, shoddy editing and body double shit that is so obviously not Bruce Lee when they keep on cutting back to, like, footage from Way of the Dragon or, Big Boss.
Yeah, that stuff's just so kind of weird. I just almost feel like they'd probably be better off if they just use that actor, you know what I mean, and just said, boom, that's it. Like, we're just going to film all his shots, you know what I mean? Whatever.
You give him the Matches Malone costume most of the movie, and then when he goes into the towers, he's like, I can finally take this off, rip,
Yeah, I know, it finally kind of gets there, but for the most part, yeah, it's just... Yeah, it's almost like they should have just took, like, the Billy Lowe character, pretty much, and just said, like, hey, let's just film him the whole time. Like, we don't need to have the weird cuts of everything like that back to Bruce. Just let him do all the acting scenes. Let him even do the close-ups. You know, I mean, like, I think it's fine when he's got the costumes on and when he's got the glasses on and everything, because that just looks cool in itself, because that's always sort of like, you see Bruce Lee, like, in his pictures like that, but you never saw that, like, in the movies. And it's kind of weird, because this even brings some of those, like, when people kind of think of, like, Bruce Lee in their head, there is a lot of stuff from this Game of Death that literally kind of fit into the lore of Bruce Lee as time goes on, which is kind of like the odd thing about it.
I'll say that, because I think you said this, I'm not sure if it was last Bruce Lee episode or one before, but all the, like, that was more of a stage presence. In real fights, he would not do that, or really practicing, he would not do that. That was more of just his signature for film. It is funny when you watch this movie, because, you watch a lot of the dub ones, and yeah, the dubbing might be off. But I never felt like the wah or the whole was always that off. But this one, it's a little extra awkward. I don't know what it is about all those noises, but in this one, they make those noises so, like, it's more like he's just kind of lightly making those noises. He walks by, he's like making little monkey noises as he goes around a guy. He's like, whoa! Like, there's a part where, like, somebody's swinging something at him, and I think somebody in the recording booth is just trying to have fun, because he just jumps over him, and the jump is like, whoa! Whoa! And I'm like, I don't think that was really there. I think somebody's just having fun in the recording booth.
Well, I think the thing about this movie is all that stuff's dubbed in too, and it's not Bruce Lee, because that's always the weird thing too about this movie is that it almost feels like, let's say if Bruce Lee was able to finish this before Enter the Dragon, it probably would have been a full Chinese movie and then, redubbed for English audiences. It would have been just like, in a sense, like Way of the Dragon or something like that, you know what I mean? But it's got like that mixed match where like, okay, this stuff's in English and that guy's clearly dubbed, and this one's in English and that guy's clearly dubbed. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, even the archive footage, it's interesting because at some point, like, Bruce Lee stops and talks to the other guy in English. And that's when he was looking at this thing to be a Chinese-made movie. So that's interesting to me right there. The idea that he says, like, okay, well, I know that this is probably bigger in China, but I'm going to start expanding and trying to get my world appeal going. So let's make this scene in English. Because there's a part where he says, like, with this stick, I can reach you and you can't reach me. You may have power with those two sticks, but you don't have the reach like I do. And he's throwing out some Jeet Kune Do philosophy in English right there.
Yeah, that is catchy. So maybe it was kind of pre-planned. I know that because even in that part, Bruce Lee's dubbed by another guy in there, because I just don't think they got around to recording the audio yet, because they were still probably doing it Chinese style, where they were just going to shoot it and then dub it in later.
I actually sat and watched the credits for that one because I want to see if that was his voice, and it wasn't his voice.
Yeah, so he wasn't on that one.
But it is interesting when they, I'll say, since Enter the Dragon, they start. I think this one, like, let's give it a Enter the Dragon, kind of like a little bit of a 007 kind of theme to it. Let's give this a 007 style opening.
Well, it's like, and we're also going to get John Barry, the guy who does the 007 theme song, to do all the music.
Oh, that does make sense.
So that makes it feel like, yeah, because, it's like, if you thought Enter the Dragon had a 007 theme, wait till you see this one's intro. And we even got the Bond guy to come in and do it. The other kind of thing is almost like, if you look at kind of the list of sort of different actors that Bruce Lee was going to have in the original version, is he's got an interesting kind of list of the people he sort of wanted, and he even wants George Lazenby in there as one of the guy's masters. I think George Lazenby was actually going to be Bruce Lee's master, which sounds so weird, but like...
That would have been interesting. I can see, because even before Enter the Dragon, let's try and make this more of a universal thing, because he was all about pushing martial arts to places other than China. So I can definitely see him like throwing a curveball, like, wait, you want 007 to be a martial arts master? Like, yeah, why not?
It might have been one of those ones, too, be like, hey, he turned down Bond, but I can get him in my movie.
Maybe. I could see Lazenby being up to that. I can see him being one of two things. I mean, one's like, I'm kind of bored of movies. I don't feel like it. Like, oh, Bruce seems cool. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Let's go knock over some directors.
Yeah, no, I could totally see it, because I think George Lazenby was always that kind of guy who, like, he almost needed, like, high adventure, and just, he did things by, like, fly by night almost, kind of. And, like, the idea of, like, hey, we're going to lock you in for 5 007 movies just sound like, fuck you, I'm going to grow a beard and do what the fuck I want. I'm Australian. You can't cage me. England.
He was just playing Bond just to fuck him over, like just to give him a hope, just to pull that hope away.
Yeah, exactly, one of those ones. So that could have been kind of cool. Hey, shit, even like in like the original listing of stuff, they got Corey Yuen in there, the director. Like, this sounds so weird. I think of Corey Yuen as the director of Dead or Alive, and I know that's probably like not what people want, but I think he also did Transporter and all that kind of stuff too. He was in the original cast. Jackie Chan even had like a tiny looks like role and so on, and same with like Jackie Chan's kind of theater brothers and stuff. Yuen Bo was in there, and some of the other guys. Of course, you had Bolo was going to be in there as well from Enter the Dragon, so it looked like this was going to have like a real like hardcore kind of like 70s almost like action movie like Expendables type cast. Well, some of these guys would have been expendable like characters later in life, but at the time, it's still some big action guys.
If you throw all together like if you put all of Bruce Lee's movies together and you pick enough of I think you could make a fighting game out of all, like, all right, Bruce Lee is just all his characters. But I feel like you could honestly pick, like, make a badass Bruce Lee fighting. You got Bolo, you got Rob Wall, you got Abdul Hakim Jabbar, you got Chuck Norris. You got to, like, I think if you put them all together, like, there's enough there for a good roster.
Well, yeah, like, even let's just say, like, let's say you had kind of, like, just to make it not seem too extreme, we're kind of like in the Street Fighter 2 kind of section. We only need maybe about 12 characters or so, give or take. Maybe if you want the bonus fighters or whatnot. But let's just say we're at Champion Edition or whatnot. Because then you even got the villains from, like, Big Boss or, in there. Some of the, like, the other characters along the way.
James Tien.
Yeah, because, I mean, in each, movie, you easily got at least about 4 or 5 characters, Yeah.
And you even got, like, I forget, he's like... He's his flabby friend that he's kind of like plays the dumbass in a lot of the movies.
Oh, Sammo Hung?
I think so. He was the guy that Bruce Lee was slapping around at the beginning of Enter the Dragon.
Yeah, and he's the one. He's also at he's in Game of Death. He's the guy that fights what's his name?
Rob Wall.
Yeah, Rob Wall. And he apparently did the choreography for the other stuff that wasn't Bruce Lee in that movie. So that's kind of cool.
I got a feeling like when they're talking about Way of the Dragon, they're talking about who's going to die in Way of the Dragon, and they get to him, and he's all like, do I have to die? Like, you don't have to die, but you will have to let me beat the shit out of you in your underwear in my next movie. Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to be all trim and cut, right? Like, yeah, I am. Like, all right, I'm going to start, like, doing push-ups and all that. No, you're not. No, you're not. We got to remember. All right? So, yeah. You stay just this way. Be ready to film in 6 months.
I know exactly one of those things, but no, there is like such like a good possibility to have all these kind of like, characters brought in for like a sweet, like, fighting game. They'd almost, even if you just did it like the Street Fighter 2 style, like you almost kind of, because nowadays you can always do like sort of the retro 16-bit style game. Well, this one would almost be perfect for like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there is that,
kind of
that sort of fighting game of like, there's the Dragon, the Bruce Lee story one on Super Nintendo.
I never played that one, but I heard it was good. I don't know. I imagine you're just playing. It's a fighting game. You just basically play as Bruce Lee at different stages. And I'll say there's that whole thing. It kind of confused me as a kid because when I saw parts of Dragon, the Bruce Lee story as a kid, and he's in that mental like mind state, and he has the demon, the guy in armor, walking around chasing his kid, and I'm thinking like, did this really fucking happen? Because I'm just kind of. I'm like, is this how he died? Watching the movie, the guy gets like spikes coming out of him. He's actually fighting a literal demon, but then it was just more about fighting his internal demons or some shit like that. So,
well, those like those kind of moments in life where, like, as a kid, just like you just go, well, why would they just make shit up? Obviously it's got to all be real, right?
And really, like, they make it up to be like, oh, we don't want you teaching white people our style, so. We're going to have you fight in this underground. In real life, it was probably just at a YMCA.
Yeah, well, this is nothing that exciting. They actually had to pay the rental fee for the day pass.
Split it.
But he's like, what's the other funny thing, too, as you think about with Game of Death? Is that, like, it's almost that thing that, like, if you thought Enter the Dragon was, like, that kind of, like, the video game kind of, like, movie, like, really Game of Death at the end of the day is even more video game-like, and almost like a time period, like, pretty much before video games, you have this thing it's set perfectly to be a game. Like, it doesn't matter, it could be a video game today on, PlayStation 4 even, you know what I mean?
A brawler. This is a total, like, if Enter the Dragon is your standard fighting game, Game of Death is kind of like a brawler.
It's like a brawler, or it's even like, I was going to say, it's a fighting game like in like that Power Stone kind of style, like maybe a 3D fighting game, where you kind of like climb up and so on. Because, like, granted, I know they have this tower in there. I'm assuming there was going to be some other scenes beyond, like, it wasn't be like, imagine Bruce Lee pitching this movie like, it's a 7-story tower. Like, okay, so what else is in the movie? That's it. A tower. You're going to save so much money on this because it's just going to be these 7 stories is all we need to be built. And you can build them on the ground, too. It doesn't have to be a tower. We'll have a model.
I'll also say something about it is a lot of people like to just kind of like, oh, yeah, Bruce Lee, he was good at punching, and he kind of got the ball rolling in the end. But the thing is, he actually was, like, a lot of things in his movies kind of came over to America. He was like, after Enter the Dragon, and his other movies became more popular, you saw a lot more interesting fights in movies, not just from kung fu movies, but just in movies in general. There's a little bit more choreography to it. It was no longer like that 1942 like black and white Batman thing where they're just like struggling, like, oh, you motherfucker, just like, just a big ass dude just in like a struggling like criminals for a while, like, you motherfucker. Because I'm not gonna lie, if you ever watched the 1942 like Batman black and white movie serials, where they're just like fighting, like, just like, we're fighting the evil Japanese government, it's just a white guy squinting really hard, If you ever watched that and just watch the fight scenes, because I was getting all amped up, like, okay, this is because I was just kind of getting really back into Batman. I'm like, all right, let's get some Batman history here. And watching this thing, like, oh, this is kind of hard to watch.
I just love, like, Batman and Robin just drive around in like 40s, like, just Dodge, just regular vehicle, nothing really too exciting about it.
And like he has like the old man pants that can basically come up to his nipples just about.
Yeah, exactly. I will say though that, like, the thing too is it's almost like the great, I guess you would say, pre-Bruce Lee choreography though, in like fight scenes used to be like in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s was all like the sword battles that they used to have, because that was the one where, like, it was like the equivalent of like a kung fu movie where you would get this like 10-minute long sword fight like at the end of the movie, or you'd get a couple of them throughout the way, and they would be so dialed in. Like, it's like once watch The Mark of Zorro. Speaking of Batman, watch that one. Doesn't matter which one you watch. You can either watch the 1942 one, which is amazing, or you can watch like the 18 or 7, whatever the one that Batman's parents died to. Both of those ones have amazing choreography for that sword stuff. Because that's another one I always say is like, you never get good sword battles anymore in movies. Like, good sword battles just like totally went away. Because nowadays it's like they always like cut so much, it just feels like you could just tell somebody, okay, Bob, swing the sword once this way. Okay, we got it. Now swing it this way. Okay, now swing it this way. Well, what am I doing? We're going to add it together. Don't worry about it. You know, where in these ones, you would get long cuts like Bruce Lee movies, so you could actually see that these guys actually knew what the fuck they were doing with swords. You know, you get like Errol Flynn fucking kicking ass and so on.
Yeah,
like Douglas Fairbanks or any of those guys.
You know, like all fight scenes before. Oh yeah, I was just hoping that I didn't come across like all fight scenes before Bruce Lee were dog shit. Not that, but as far as like hand-to-hand combat, it wasn't as graceful or choreographed in like, at least American cinema as Bruce Lee was. Maybe unless it was a badass boxing movie of some kind. But going off that though, I was gonna say shit. You're talking about sword. I guess I think the last time I saw a really good sword fight in an American movie, and this might seem people might like scream black. Talk a little bit of shit about the movie, but I think Last Jedi was probably the last really good sword fight I saw in a movie, because there's that long shot where it's Kylo Ren and Rey fighting off all those red guards at once, and it's shot more of kind of like a samurai movie, sort of. Like that was pretty badass.
No, that scene is cool. I'm not saying anything against that. I guess that's like, I wasn't even thinking like Star Wars in like my mind. I was thinking of more just like straight up traditional like sword fighting.
Yeah, because I guess you don't get a whole lot. Find some interesting stuff on Netflix if you look long enough, probably. But as far as like a theatrical movie, not probably. I mean, I imagine Mulan is. I haven't seen it yet, but it's probably gonna have some of that too. But
well, yeah, I'll say I guess Chinese movies and so on do. But I guess more what I was leading towards was like more like swashbuckling pirate type, those type of sword fighting. It's like you just don't see too like that like anymore. And I think it's because in America it's become too much of a liability. Like swords are probably like, even the fake swords are still dangerous. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's probably the thing. I mean, because there's a point where we got a lot of badass sword fights that just weren't like martial arts stuff, not just like your typical like Chinese or Japanese movies, but I mean. Thinking on like Matrix, thinking on like the first two Pirates of the Caribbeans.
Yeah, because the first couple Pirates ones had some pretty good scenes in it. As time kind of went on, I just remember like the last couple ones, it was like you saw the cuts, and that's always where I feel like when you see too many cuts in an action scene, it's almost that kind of thing. Now I know people like the quick cuts, but sometimes in an action scene it makes it look like, oh, you're not really, you're almost cheating your way through it. You know what I mean?
And not to be total fanboys here, but it does link back to what we're talking about. I mean, one of the best sword fight scenes filmed in probably the last 20 years. One of the best is at least Kill Bill Volume 1. She's even wearing the yellow and black jumpsuit in that.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Like, and that's totally badass and cool, and so on.
And rockabilly, bunch of yakuza.
Yeah, exactly. And also too, it's like almost like. And when I think of like sometimes sword fights too, it's like that straight like one-on-one, like almost that kind of sword fight too. Like maybe I'm getting a little bit picky on like what I'm kind of thinking of exactly, but just like that one where it's just like, oh, here's this long kick-ass scene where these guys are fighting each other to the death, like like 1938 Robin Hood, and they're fighting on the stairs and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah. Doesn't too often anymore, but like you said, probably a liability.
But it is definitely true that Bruce Lee, he did kind of make like the movies kind of came back with sort of vengeance for like the 70s. They always kind of called like the 70s area starts to become like that sort of macho man where they just started making just like I almost kind of think it's so you watch these movies. I feel like this is that time period where I just picture like my grandparents and on both sides almost, and it's just sort of like it's the time where like. They make movies where it's almost like there's the man movie and there's the woman movie. There might be that sort of in between one, but because you know what I mean, like because some of these movies, especially like action movies from the 70s, they just feel like it's such like a dude's movie. Like it's just half the time there's like not even like there's not even like a woman in the movie. It's just all men, just like throwing punches, kicking ass, drinking beer and getting angry.
Well, especially this movie, when you have the girlfriend, Anne, played by Colleen Camp, the whole time just basically like, please be safe out there, Billy. Oh, I will. You just stay.
Yeah, I know. She just kind of. I love it. They just like stuffs her in the corner, like in that like I don't know factory of whatever they got stored in there.
I will say this though, this watching this movie because I know your taste in movies pretty well by this point for how many podcasts we've done and hearing what you like in this movie and that movie. Is your favorite type of ending, whereas we kill the bad guy credits.
Oh god, it does have that like total 70s perfect like we're done like no extra endings, no dragging us along and so on. It's kind of the interesting one though is when you watch the Bruce Lee one and sort of like I mean I know it's just how the footage sort of ends, but like Bruce Lee's almost like after he fights Kareem, he's just like walking down like the stairs and he's like yelling out the window like, yo, somebody come, is anybody coming up here? And then you just hear people down below just being like, oh, I don't know, that looks like a lot of stairs. Yeah.
Is there an elevator?
Yeah. Oh, there's not? Well, I'm just going to stand here. Stand by the soup guy. He's kind of nice. He says I can get a third bowl for free if I order two.
Just, you hear all that from a distance. You see Bruce Lee, like, holding his side, leaning against the window, like,
bleeding out. Well, because it almost has that thing where like it's because the whole point was Bruce Lee was supposed to go upstairs and find something. It was like he was sent on like a mission from like his mother to go into the attic and get something, and then by the time he got up there, he got confused and he got distracted, and then he didn't get what he was going for, and then he's coming down, and then he just kind of keeps going down these stairs, but almost the way that it goes, because it's almost like nobody's coming to help him, and he keeps yelling out like on each floor, and then as it kind of goes down, it's almost like it fades out. It almost has that feeling like he actually ends up just kind of dying, go down the stairs. Like all these battles in a row have presented too much damage to him.
I got the vibe that they didn't know entirely what they were filming, or Bruce Lee wasn't telling them, so he was there just filming that shit just to have it, you know? Mm-hmm. And who knows what would have happened at the end. I could see it being one of two things. Either one of the Bruce Lee endings where everything goes good for him, or one of those sad ones where in some way he wins, but he has to die in the process or get arrested.
Yeah, those Chinese philosophies. Well, he did some wrong, so he has to go to jail or die. We can't.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing you said. There's a law like if he was going against authority, even if it was for the right reason, you still had to die at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it was that like in China, if a character broke the law in a sense, they had to face some kind of consequences. Like, and I think their whole thing was like, whoa, we don't want Chinese people just going out and dressing up like, cable installers and, attacking the Japanese. That war's over now. I know we're all still a little angry at the Japanese, but you know what I mean? We gotta make amends and not just start fucking fighting people and killing them. And hanging out in graveyards eating somebody's dog.
No, I think that it's kind of hard to say what it would have been. I think it maybe if like depending on how much longer that movie would have been or how many more levels he had to make for that thing, maybe just going downstairs and seeing all the different bodies, kind of like all the car make this happen, as he kind of trudged down the stairs all in pain, seeing all the bodies. Maybe it would have been something kind of like that. Who knows? But no, I think it was kind of like. By that point, either they didn't know what they're going to film, so just like, let's just film this part. We never know when we might need it,
Yeah, well, you can kind of see that, and then you have all this footage, and you're like, Bruce knew what to do with it, but now he isn't here, so, okay, I guess we'll just kind of piece it together and see what happens and whatnot. And it's almost like, just that interesting kind of way that sort of Bruce Lee probably was like putting stuff together, like he kind of had his just own kind of way, almost like a Clint Eastwood kind of style. Because I really do think at the end of the day, let's say if Bruce Lee was around right now, I think he'd have a legacy just like Clint Eastwood, but it would just be like, obviously in the Bruce Lee style.
I would like to think that in the late 80s, maybe like, I'm just thinking I'm time-wise, like realistically time-wise, kind of getting there. I'd like to think somewhere in the 80s, they would have made a movie together, and it would Rush Hour to some extent, or some kind of oddball buddy cop movie or something kind of like to that effect.
Yeah, sort of like there's that one where it's instead it's Clint Eastwood and what's his name, Smokey and the Bandit.
Oh, Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds. There's that one. I think I was gonna say City Hunter. That's a Jackie Chan movie, but it's like called something like City, something or another. And they're like, it's kind of like a crime caper in Chicago. Kind of funny, kind of full of action.
You know, I don't think I've seen that one.
It was kind of weird. It was one of those ones I found at the pawn shop many years ago. I said one of those other Clint Eastwood kind of type movies, and Burt Reynolds and so on. But no, I definitely could see like the proto Rush Hour type movie.
Or 48 hours, something kind of like that.
Yeah, just like I don't know why. Just picture Rush Hour. I was like, well, I guess Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood's the Chris Tucker character. I don't know why. I just pictured him like same script, but it's Clint Eastwood instead.
It probably would have been like, you know,
you put your own shit
Bruce Lee
in the back.
Like,
I hate Skycap.
I'm not a bad boy. I'm FBI. You understand? You understand the words coming out of my mouth.
Just like word for word, like the exact same thing as Chris Tucker.
So when he goes to that underground like club and he,
what's up, my nigga? It's like, oh well, that was a weird line for Clint Eastwood to be saying.
Just fist bumping some like, you know, black dude saying that like it's Clint Eastwood. It's fine.
I guess it's not that weird because
it's
just like Escape from Alcatraz. He just says it. Nobody seems to bat an eye.
Yeah, we kind of figured, Clint. We kind of figured. But it's also like, I honestly think that, I mean, I imagine it would have been him being kind of like gruff and angry, and like Bruce being kind of like very passive and saying a smart aleck comment. Like somehow Bruce would be right, but Clint would also be like, you know, it probably would have just been like probably more like 48 hours, more like a gruff, angry old man, like the young hip guy.
Yeah, that would definitely be probably the style it would be in, you know what I mean? Because that would definitely be the 80s way to go about it. But, yeah, there'd be so many of those kind of cool movies.
Rush Hour with God, I can't believe I'm drawing a fucking blank on his name. He's a legend.
Clint Eastwood, Jackie Chan, Chris Tucker.
He's black. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on his name. No, he was big in like the 80s and the 70s.
Wesley Snipes.
Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor and Bruce Lee in like a 1980 version of Rush Hour would have been amazing.
Oh my gosh, that would have been really awesome.
That would have been one of the greatest movies ever made.
It probably would have been. And then somehow you'd fit Gene Hackman in there because he's always in those movies.
Oh,
or
yeah.
Not Gene Hackman, I mean Gene Wilder.
Oh, Gene Wilder? Oh, you can get Gene Wilder to play like the crook.
Yeah, that'd actually be kind of cool as Gene Wilder as a bad guy.
Yeah.
Because I think about it, I don't think I've ever seen Gene Wilder as like a full-on bad guy, I guess. You'd probably say some movies. I guess it depends on how you look at Willy Wonka, but
Well, also, I'm going to say, I don't want to get on a whole other topic here. I think Gene Wilder would have been a perfect Joker.
I think so too. That would have been. He's actually like one of those ones that you almost, because he was still alive in '89. You almost could have had him.
So.
Yeah, had him other than Jack Nicholson. Not saying Jack Nicholson's not amazing, but like in that time period, I think it would have still worked. You know.
Yeah, if we were going back to like a Batman movie being made in the mid '80s, and you're trying to because they were trying to make a dark, gritty Batman movie for over like 10 years or something like that. So I could see Gene Wilder being someone as they looked at. I want to say Eddie Murphy was looked at as either the Riddler, possibly, but yeah.
That would have been actually kind of interesting.
That would
have been kind of fun, actually.
But anyway, back to... Yeah, I would have been interested in seeing that, but going back to Game of Death, this is, like I said, this is like not... It's probably, out of all his movies, it's probably the worst one. And it's not saying it's a god-awful movie. It's just... In concept, it's good. The action's even good. It's just the editing is clunky as fuck, so you know you're not watching Bruce Lee most of the time.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the sort of thing. It's in those 34 minutes, and that's almost the best way, I think, to almost watch this movie. It's not saying that you can't watch... I think every Bruce Lee fan should at least watch Game of Death once, the 78 version. But I feel like in the long run, after you kind of watch that, you could almost just watch that Redux version of just the 34 minutes of all Bruce Lee, and that in itself pretty much... It's just like that's all the best footage of the film anyways. I mean, not saying there's not other cool stuff in, the 78 one, but But yeah, that's the weirdest thing about this movie is it has probably some of the best Bruce Lee fight scenes of all time. Yet it's probably it's the weakest movie because there's just the rest of it's just not. It's just not. I think that's just kind of hard. It's like you're going into a movie expecting a Bruce Lee movie, though you get kind of this sort of B Bruce Lee exploitation film, and it's kind of all mismatched together. And it's not bad, but just definitely not the other four. Let's just say that.
Yeah, still definitely worth watching. But if you have to watch one or the other, if somehow you're in some weird time crunch and you can only watch one or the other, watch the archive footage.
Yeah.
And you could probably find it on YouTube, I would imagine. I know that they have it all pristine collection, but I bet you could probably find the original 30-something minutes somewhere on the internet.
Exactly. Yeah, that Redux version's the way to go. But hopefully someday someone will find it. Because it sounds like there was over 100 minutes shot. Now, granted, I'm assuming that most of that is all kind of like, Bruce Lee throwing a kick, wrong, throwing a kick, wrong, throwing a kick, wrong, and the people are adding that kind of stuff up. But by what Bob Wall said and everything, it sounds like there is some other scenes out there. So hopefully as time goes on, they'll be able to extend that Redux version even longer and maybe put in a couple other cool stuff in there and what have you. Beyond that, though, I think it would be cool if somebody did just kind of, since they've done other remakes of Bruce Lee movies, like, they got, Fist of Fury remakes and whatnot, and Big Boss ones, too. It would be kind of interesting to see someone just kind of, even though I know we don't have, Bruce Lee's actual script, but just kind of take that synopsis that's kind of there of, what the Bruce Lee story was supposed to be, just interview all the guys that were supposed to be in it, kind of mismatch that together, and then just make a full-on Game of Death film. I think that would be kind of cool. I don't, get the dude that played him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because I think that's the same guy that played him in the Bruce Lee, the TV show that came out a little bit before that.
By this point, there's so many there's so many Bruceploitation movies. I think that, maybe at this point people are tired of those. Maybe they are in China. But right now, I'm I'd be up for that. I'd be interested to see that as long as it's done with respect.
Yeah, and that's the key thing is, literally make it like you're making a full-on we're going to make a Bruce Lee movie, we're going to make it serious, and so on. And, I just keep seeing there's, in a sense, in the last handful of years, there's just been a handful of these, here's a Bruce Lee character in a movie, like Once Upon a Time, or in Ip Man 4, they got the Bruce Lees in there. Or even there was the other one, too, where had Wong Man Jack in it, and so on. The one where he comes over and they're like, "Oh, you fucked up at that karate fight," or at that. I sound like a guy. I sound like one of those 90-year-old men. Yeah, karate, kung fu. I don't know what the fuck was going on. Just saw fist and feet flying everywhere. But God, I can't remember what that one was called. That was a good one too. Birth of the Dragon, I think is what it was called. Yeah, so it's it's one of those ones, I feel like it's kind of an ideal time. It's not say it's oh, they're going on a big marathon, these movies, but they're just coming out in little pockets that I feel like why not? But we'll see what happens. There's that Donnie Yen comedy that just came out that looks like it's called Enter the Fat Dragon, and it looks like Game of Death cover on it. I don't know. I love me some
Enter the Fat Dragon. It stars Donnie Yen.
I love me Donnie Yen, and I pretty much have bought anything that has Donnie Yen's name on it. Even if some of the movies are kind of weird or he's barely in it, I don't really care. I just buy him anyways. And that one maybe, but it sounds odd that a lot of times comedy kung fu movies, I don't know that I just never been the biggest fan of those. But since it's Donnie Yen, I'm thinking of giving it a try.
I think that when it's that slapsticky type of humor, that's where it's a little weird. But if it probably had kind of I guess, I don't know. I think that just cultural difference in comedy is a thing. 'Cause I remember I used to work with a bunch of Chinese dudes at my last job, and they were younger guys. They were probably early 20s to mid 20s, and I was showing this one guy I worked with who's a white dude. I showed him that Meat Canyon video of the Wabbit season 1, where it's kind of a horror thing where Bugs Bunny's a rapist. He corners Elmer Fudd. He has a really creepy deep voice. He's like, "You got a tight little man pussy, don't you? It stinks." When he's saying that shit, me and my friend Matt, who I was showing it to, were fucking dying of laughter. And we showed it to these couple of Chinese dudes that we work with, And it's not like it's like they were born in this country. They're still, very much like Chinese lifestyle. And we show them that, just a lot of blank stares. Like, what the fuck is this? So I think that there's just some kind of thing. There's like some barriers there. They're like, well, maybe we wouldn't find this funny, but they'd find this fun, that kind of thing. So I notice a lot of like Chinese comedy is often slapsticky, at least the stuff that pops up over here.
I mean, I will say that mostly those are the kind of things you could show that to about like 90% of people, and it would probably scare them away. You know what I mean? That's more not really like a cultural thing. That's more just like a comedy tolerance thing. So it's just that kind of thing that I've always sort of learned in life is that most people, their comedy tolerance is really like low. Like so, like when they get those extreme comedies, they get thrown off.
Maybe that wasn't the best example, but I'm just thinking about that because I show that to you or this dude over here. It's like one of the funniest things. We're quoting it like every other day, and then then I showed these guys just like, what the fuck are you showing me, dude?
Well, because I'll just say is if you probably went and showed that to like a jock guy at school, he would give you that same reaction. Be like, dude, there's something wrong with you, man. Like that's wrong. That's stupid. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people like they just don't get that kind of stuff. So I think that's sort of what it is. But yeah, no, I think sometimes even like some of those comedy ones, because every like kung fu when you get those like sometimes you'll buy a movie and you're like, oh sweet, this one looks awesome, and then you kind of turn it on and you're like, oh, it's a comedy one. I don't know why they mostly always are like, it's like unless it's Rush Hour.
Well, what's that Jet Li one? Was it called The Legend or something? There is like a Jet Li one.
Yeah, there's one that I think that's what it was. It was either like a Jet Li and it's like a Jet Li and a Donnie Yen movie or something. It has like two guys.
Yeah, I think Legend. I think that's the one I'm thinking of. I'm trying to remember. I remember
Legend,
I rented that one.
Legend's like that one's like Once Upon a Time, and that's like one of those like kind of historical ones.
Election, and it's an action comedy, and just looking at it, I assumed it was just gonna be a badass kung fu movie, and then watching it, it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, this is a comedy, and the comedy felt really weird. If you look at the cover, you would not expect this was gonna be a action comedy. It looks very intense and very serious. But then you watch the movie like, oh, this is an action comedy, and the action comedy was very kind of slapsticky and over the top. And I think sometimes that could work, but I mean that one I was just being thrown off. Works with me in like Jackie Chan movies, but I think it's a case by case basis, really. So you have something Legend of the Fat Dragon.
That's the odd one. Is then you have Jackie Chan, and it pretty much always works on those. Unless they got weird dubbing, because sometimes the weird dubbing can throw it off too. But if you as long as you catch them in like Chinese and so on, they're mostly fine. But
I guess the Jackie Chan shit, I guess it's like a lot of the comedy is within the fight. Him like spinning and sliding around and just barely missing and all. A lot of the comedy comes from that. Where in The Legend, like Jet Li all like trying to like dress up like a lady to get by to escape like some cops or something like that, so.
Yeah, so weird stuff, but yeah, beyond all that good stuff, all kinds of fun Bruce Lee things. Still, no matter what, check out if you got that Criterion collection, pretty badass. We'll put a link in the description if you want to go check that out on Amazon. Totally worth having for your DVD, Blu-ray shelf, 4K, whatever you got going on, VHS, Laserdisc. There's all sorts of fun formats. But till then, go to oldmanorange.com for more podcasts, comic books like Pizza Boys, animations, and all that fun stuff. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Ryan Dunnigan.
We'll see you some other time.
Later, folks.
Thanks again for listening to the Old Man Orange podcast. Sure, check out oldmanorange.com for more podcasts, cartoons, music, animation, and a whole lot more. We also have the Old Man Orange blog going with all kinds of fun stuff. If you easily want to support the show, use one of our Amazon links either on the website or in the description of the podcast below. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show either on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Newgrounds, or anywhere else that you seem to get this podcast from. Grab the sitcom-styled comic book Pizza Boys on either Comic Central, Comixology, or Amazon. Want more podcasts? Check out the Indie Comics Club over at Comic Central. I also got a workout website called Thor's Hidden Gym, filled with fitness tips and tricks, videos, and a whole lot more fun stuff in the calisthenics world. Talk to us on Twitter at Spencer S. Holmes and Dunnigan Ryan. Like our Facebook pages of Old Man Orange Productions and Pizza Boys Comic. Thanks again. We're out of here.